Welcome everybody. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with My Security Media, and it's proud to be hosting this webinar with Sunshine Coast City Council, Testing Tech in Paradise. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me just run through some protocols before we kick in and meet our panel. This session is being recorded. Questions, Q&A. This is a bit of an ideation session that will follow on from an ideation session that was held last year in Maroochydore, but you're welcome to ask questions throughout, even as each panellist is presenting and speaking, but just use the Q&A if you can as well. And we have a national and international audience as well, so welcome in the chats to let us know where you're listening from. And the takeaway here will be to reach out to Wendy as well. We've allocated about 60 minutes, and if you hear that background, I'm in Korea, Seoul, just outside Seoul at the moment, so we are truly international. The agenda, we're going to hear from the Sunshine Coast University. We're going to hear also from the Manufacturing Excellence Forum. We're also going to hear from Geospatial Intelligence, as well as the city itself in terms of their smart city programs. And then we'll have a presentation on the Sunshine Coast as a region for technology. So strap yourselves in for the next hour or so. And again, welcome questions throughout this session. Our panel today is Dr. Adrian McCallum. He's the Discipline Lead for Engineering University of the Sunshine Coast University of the Sunshine Coast, I beg your pardon. Riley McCluskey, she's the Business Development Lead for Geospatial Intelligence and also a graduate of the University of the Sunshine Coast. We've had Riley on before. Tim Kelly, Director Manufacturing Excellence Forum, also on the Sunshine Coast. We've got Michael Wirat, the Smart Cities Lead with Sunshine Coast Council, and then Wendy McDonald, Investment Lead, Sunshine Coast Council as well. Thank you very much, panel, for joining us. Just checking audios, everyone's on?
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you, Chris.
Great.
Pleasure.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
okay.
mate.
Just a shout out, this is a series, a national series. So this is not just a one-off webinar, and we're putting together an event on the 3rd of July, an in-person event in Maroochydore on top of the Sunshine Coast Council building. So far, our panel consists of Fleet Space, Southern Launch. We'll have Tim back with MEF, Sunshine Coast, and also the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services with Simon Webster, the Executive Manager with Advanced Capability. And again, looking at the infrastructure and available on the Sunshine Coast. So very relevant as we move forward, and it's an opportunity to meet in person following this webinar as well. And I know from our international audience, it's a good excuse to get to the Sunshine Coast. Adrian, let's pass over to you, Discipline Lead for Engineering at the University of the Sunshine Coast. And again, open discussion and welcome questions, but maybe some background into the infrastructure and the research that the university is involved with as well.
Yeah, look, thanks, Chris, and thanks to my fellow panelists and to all our guests. Look, I'm fortunate that I've been involved in the nature of geospatial intelligence for some time. I'm not sure if that spiel there covers it, but I was in defence for 20 years before becoming an academic. So necessarily my world revolved around primarily the maritime domain, what surface ships or what submarines might be doing. So, of course, that's an interest that Australia and many nations retain. And the sort of thing we're talking about today is essential, of course, in the defence space and across the whole defence spectrum. So that's a bit of context, I suppose, to how I fit into this piece of picture. With regards to the Sunshine Coast University, of course, I think as per our discussions before this panel, I think we're yet to realise fully how much we can benefit and leverage the data that is out there across all domains, whether that's satellite derived, airborne derived, surface derived, subsurface derived, marine derived, we can go on, infrastructure derived. You know, we are entering and we are amongst and amidst the world of data. And I personally am playing catch up, I suppose, from an engineering perspective as to the volumes of data that are out there, how we best capture those data, what we can do with those data and then leverage that data to benefit any aspect of research. I think, you know, you would be using the term data, of course. So it's a massive area of focus for us at the university, regardless of the sector that you're in at the university. Data accumulation, analysis and management and leveraging is key. One of our key themes at the university at the moment, of course, is sustainability. And from my perspective, it's all about sustainable infrastructure. I was at a workshop in Brisbane earlier in the week, which was focusing on the sustainable built environment. And one of the highlights there, of course, was data. You know, we need baseline data on buildings, on infrastructure, on whatever it might be, so that we can examine change over time. So across all of those domains and perspectives that I mentioned, the ongoing real-time dynamic collection of data is key to provide insight into whatever facet or area of research is of interest to you. And there's a whole wealth and breadth of those at University of the Sunshine Coast.
Well, something I omitted to say earlier, in terms of this particular session, we're looking at smart cities, security, critical infrastructure, as well as space. So again, we're really looking at the critical infrastructure side. You mentioned sustainability, Adrian. Are you crossed in terms of, you know, even into cybersecurity and the like? The very broad spectrum of these industry sectors, is there any sort of strength that you might have or focus areas?
Look, I, of course, am primarily representing engineering today, but again, the more I ascertain the value of what we're discussing here, the more we move into the IT space. And within the School of Science, Technology and Engineering at the university, we have colleagues who specialise in cybersecurity, in IT, etc. They know far more about these things than I. I know that the Sunshine Coast recently hosted the launch of CIISAC, so critical infrastructure and security in the cybersecurity realm. So there's a lot going on in that area, and we are very much involved in that space, and certainly very keen to facilitate, prosecute, and conduct very useful research in that field, along with our industry partners, both here on the coast and in a far broader domain.
Great, beautiful. And we're in contact with the CIISAC as well, and hopefully we might have them along on July 3. Tim Kelly, Director Manufacturing Excellence Forum, and I believe you were the sort of the kickoff for the ideation session last year when they were looking at, the council was looking at the Geospatial Intelligence Excellence Forum, because you're a perfect model to follow. Yeah, just some insights into the MEF.
Yeah, sure. No, well, that's very, very generous. I don't know who's paid you to say that, but it's money well spent. So the Manufacturing Excellence Forum was started in March 2021. Huge amount of support from Sunny Coast Council, in particular Economic Development Branch, Scott Bruce, Andy Eves Brown, Anthony Edgar, those people. And we're really fundamentally about creating a centre of excellence or cluster of advanced manufacturing here on the Sunshine Coast, which is, it's on the Sunshine Coast. I think we have a lot of natural advantages in that space. As a country, there are a number of headwinds in and around manufacturing. Generally, the perception of manufacturing in Australia being on the decline is generally false, and the data demonstrates that pretty clearly. And I think, coming back to what Adrian's been saying around data-driven decision-making, I think one of the things we haven't done very well is actually to demonstrate how manufacturing, how big it is, how much it contributes, how much it's growing. And one of the things we really need to highlight is that it's growing differently to how it used to grow, which used to be very labour-based, very very person intensive, because of the current nature of labour shortages and those kinds of things. We're having to be more inventive. It's actually forcing us into Industry 4 practices, Industry 4.0 practices, which has become a bit of a dirty word because it's been overused. But really, it's about helping people to leverage themselves better to be more productive, and being more productive generally means being more competitive. So we are seeing a shift towards that. There's about 1,400 manufacturers here on the Sunny Coast LGA, just in isolation. Some of them have, world-class capability. There's at our event last month, we were up at Zone RV in Coolum. They've got the biggest 3D printer in the Southern Hemisphere. It's 22 metres long and 5 metres wide and 1.6 metres high. And it's got an integrated 5-axis CNC mill, and they can print out the mould for a composite tool that's as big as a car and have it machined in about a day. And they can be laying up composite into it the next day. And when you're leveraging those kinds of processes, the amount of components and labour involved in the assembly process goes from hundreds of parts and thousands of hours to, maybe not even 10 parts, but single figure number of parts and tens of hours instead. So, that's just one example of how to leverage tech to do stuff that is internationally competitive and to be able to do it effectively from anywhere.
The model of the forum, is it a networking and information sharing sort of model that you have? Is it anything unique in terms of the use of the term forum? For me, that's a sort of a networking term.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the foundation. So we run events every month. we have between 70 and 150 people come along in person to these events. We always have them at manufacturers because manufacturers love seeing other manufacturers. Yeah. It's out of hours. We make sure there's beer, flies and honey, all those analogies. So that's a big part of it. We send weekly emails. We connect people in behind the scenes a lot. So from as a forum, that's very, very true. We also run a lot of programs though. So we run programs like workshops on lean manufacturing or how to protect your IP from a legal perspective, through to we've just launched today really, and it's probably going to be news to Wendy and Adrian, but the version 2 of our database, which maps 2,000 businesses, of which about 1,500 are local manufacturers. And it captures their industry, their sub-industry, and their capability. So who they serve, so mining, agriculture, food and bev, whatever, what their product is, so organics, craft brewing, whatever, and then what their capabilities are, CNC machining, etc. And really that's about trying to provide good macroeconomic oversight and good capability oversight so that we're minimizing economic leakages out of the region and locals are using locals, but also we're increasing our exports so that other businesses in other regions can go, all right, well, I need this thing done. It's really easy to find what that is on the Sunshine Coast because I've got this map and this directory of what that is, and I can just go and access them directly. With the uni, we're also running an eVTOL student team, so it's an air taxi program, and we've got students from 12 years old through to 44 from high school through to university engaged in that, and we'll have something flying very simple and very small in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a model that's really about by industry for industry, and it does have a foundation of knowledge sharing, but it goes beyond that using programs to try to drive the elements that create a cluster.
Very good, and I think that comes really to the tagline that is being promoted as the testing tech in paradise. You had me at beer, but also I think that'll come back to the culture that Sunshine Coast has in terms of that collective culture, I suppose. Riley, there's a couple of ways we can go with. I'll leave it to you in terms of which way you want to go, because your research background with the university is really interesting as well, but it also drives to what you're currently doing today.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned earlier, I was a graduate of USC, and then I unfortunately had to leave the coast after graduating to try and get a job in the field. So I ended up moving to Brisbane, and then I ended up moving to Melbourne. And when I was in Melbourne, obviously COVID happened, and what it meant for how we were working completely changed. So I was able then, basically without anyone knowing, to be able to move back to the coast and to work remotely, and kind of had the lifestyle that I have now. So even before COVID was happening, the organization I work for, GI, which we specialize with utilizing over 300 different types of satellites to build products and do remote sensing for a broad range of customers. Even before I started with them, they were having conversations with Sunny Coast Council about how to leverage, some of the intelligence that we're getting out of the university. And essentially what I've been working with over the last couple of months is really trying to educate the school systems around the coast and within Southeast Queensland that what we do is a career pathway that, the local workforce can kind of move towards. I feel like predominantly, at least when I was growing up here, it was really difficult to try and understand alternative roles. It was either what your parents were doing or what your friends' parents were doing, which were very, very linear kind of pathways, and none of them coincided with tech at all. I thought that was a bit of a pipe dream. And yeah, like I said, I had to move away. So what we're trying to do now is trying to educate younger people that it is, a potential workforce to work on the sunny coast and work remotely and leverage, the high internet speeds and have a decent after work life as well. A lot of us don't enjoy living in a city. We've done that before at times of our lives, done big commutes, not particularly that big of a fan. I want to go for a surf before work, and I want to walk for a rainforest after work, and I want to be able to go and get a beer with Tim. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Well, I imagine as well as connect with potentially 2,000 manufacturers and client base there for what you do, I think that's the key aspect, is still being able to work. It's not even remote, but being able to work within a community as well as anywhere. And we haven't even touched on the infrastructure. I think we might start to do that next, but we'll come back to both the geospatial intelligence and the use of advanced technology in imaging and surveying and the like. But that'll very much segue back into the smart cities approach as well. Michael, thanks for joining us. And you're my sort of brethren in terms of what you do as a security professional working with a lot of local governments around Australia. Introduce us to what the council's doing in terms of your smart cities approach or program.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and be a part of this. The Smart Cities on the Sunshine Coast has been working for the last 8 or 9 years, building up a framework, understanding what it is that we're seeking to achieve. And as you and I were talking about beforehand, we really need to understand and get those foundations. So a key part of our process has actually been putting conduits in the ground to support the connection across the Sunshine Coast to the international submarine cable that we've got. Where council's doing developments like Maroochydore City Centre and elsewhere, we're putting in multifunction poles that allow us to put up in the public realm assets that council owns so that we can add 5G or security or devices that will allow autonomous vehicles to connect to them. The list goes on. But that infrastructure, if we don't have it, it's very expensive to add later. So our whole motto is about making sure through our smart infrastructure manual and our putting smart technologies into key locations checklist for council projects is we're building it as we go. So instead of having a separate smart cities budget, we build into existing budgets and get far more leverage and more investment by council quicker and across the entire region. And so today we've now got almost 100 operational solutions that we've built over the last 7 years through our problem and solution making pipeline, and that number grows. But we also have about 150 of those that we're not progressing. So not every idea is a good one and shouldn't be progressed at this time. So we're really clear about having a process and having that investment. And the final thing I think I'd like to share with you is about understanding the pipeline between how do you get that data-driven decision-making that Adrian was referencing at the beginning. You actually need to understand what the pipeline is from where the hardware is, the internet connectivity and how that actually works, how you ingest the data, how you format it, and then how the folk within council and externally are able to access that in a discover, explore and apply approach that is really meaningful to their own work. And that's leading to us having things like our data trailer that's allowing us to capture data in real time and make that available to staff who need it. So that's a quick overview of what we're doing, Chris, and we're having fun doing it.
Well, I think one of the things we can talk about now is the sort of the infrastructure there. It sounds like you're doing smart by design. There's safe by design, there's security by design. It sounds like you're, as you say, that fundamental infrastructure is there and being designed in. Wendy, maybe you can sort of overview in terms of the investment leads and what has happened on the Sunshine Coast and what's the point of difference, I suppose, for you. And then we'll finish off the session with you in particular, but just an introduction to your role and maybe some of the sort of highlights that you would point to. And you're on mute. Sorry, there had to be one. Thanks, Wendy.
But sorry, Chris, thank you so much and welcome everybody to this webinar and thank you so much for everybody's time. My name is Wendy McDonald. I'm investment lead for the Sunshine Coast Council. So I have two roles with two focuses. One is external, sales and marketing. So we run marketing campaigns to raise the awareness of the Sunshine Coast as an investment destination. And I'm the salesperson. So we provide a one-on-one, very personalised service if you want to come and set up on the Sunshine Coast. But it's not just actually getting you there. Once the business comes, we help companies find a site, and we very much focus on nurturing and helping them expand. So I guess I was really interested in hearing what Adrian is talking about in terms of sustainability, because how our team would link in with Adrian is that in June 2022, the Sunshine Coast became an accredited biosphere. So going forward, our values and our philosophies will all support a biosphere. Tim, I love what you were saying about the manufacturing forum, 1,400 people along. I know I've heard people say we have to go to Tim's event, and yeah, we love having a beer in our hand. In fact, someone said to me, I don't drink, but I pretend to have a beer in my hand because I want to be at those forums. Riley, I love what you were saying about how you're engaging with the schools, because that's so important in building an industry. We have to be able to nurture and develop the talent. And I guess Michael and I suppose partners in crime, because it's the Testing Tech in Paradise program has really emerged from an idea 2 years ago. And now it is marketing programs, it's testing. We do have testing tech projects underway. We have ideation sessions underway, and all of that is very much a collaboration with our team in Smart Cities, but the wider community.
Well, what I might try and do is just an open discussion now. We'll have an open panel session, and very much welcome from the audience. Any particular questions you might have, particularly in new tech, or is council open to these particular things? I'm tempted to come back to what Tim was mentioning in terms of the sort of the flight trials that you might be doing, because that sounds like that's going to be quite multidisciplinary, and even back to the likes of Adrian, how that links back to what students are studying. Tim, maybe let's give us an overview of what that involves and who some of the sort of partners or stakeholders. I don't want to put you on notice in terms of commercial information, but yeah, just how that is coming about and some of the stakeholders and what makes the Sunshine Coast a bit more open and to facilitating that kind of trial.
Yeah, great point. I mean, so there is some pretty serious commercial activity that'll be kicking off here soon, and there's a lot of zeros involved, but that's probably I'll leave that particular part there. So separately to that, there's the student team that I mentioned we were running with Sunny Coast Uni and probably about 10 or 12 or so local high schools as well. In terms of the testing, obviously we've got Caloundra Aerodrome, which is a fantastic asset. You can't do a lot of this very experimental testing in, like say at Maroochydore International Airport. It'd be totally inappropriate to be doing it there. But at Caloundra Aerodrome, it's a fantastic place to do it. From an industry side of things, we've actually got a really, really strong aeronautical-aerospace industry up here. So there's companies like Coastal Aviation, Javelin Aerospace, Helimods, those kinds of places. So we've got a pretty decent size aeronautical mechatronics basis up here. There's a lot of very, very strong fabricators in really high performance aluminium, CNC machining, carbon fiber composites. As I was mentioning before, with the dirty great big 3D printer, you've got electronics manufacturers, all those kinds of things. So the vast majority of those organizations are partners in this student team program, and they either act as mentors, so they come along to the sessions regularly, or if we run into a particular challenge, we push that challenge their way. Many of them will donate time, materials, software, hardware. So Bosch, international German company Bosch, has donated a couple of $1,000s worth of power tools, and then a whole bunch of time and training into students, again from well supervised, mind you, from 12 years old up to mid 40s, and that's really just trying to again change that perception around what manufacturing is, because we're using it to not to just cut up a bit of steel to go into a house or something like that, but it's we're transforming materials, which will hopefully be the future of transportation soon. So there's so much testing that has to go on around that. Some of that will happen at the uni, like tensile and bending testing for material specimens, through to motor testing on test rigs to understand static thrust and those kinds of things, through to hover testing, and then eventually through to flight testing.
Nice. Well, I might come back to Riley on that, given the breadth of what that program is. Riley, you mentioned surfing in the morning to walking through a rainforest in the afternoon. One concept that brings is different industries and the cross-sector approach. You've got oceanography and fisheries potentially versus forestry and land management. Is that the breadth that you find that you have in your role with geospatial intelligence? Is that cross-sector as well?
Yeah, definitely. One saying we like to say is anything that has a point and a line, as in like an X and a Y, we have some sort of interaction with. Everything needs to be mapped out. Everything needs to be visualized. Particularly when we're crossing sectors where we're working in with a lot of different organizations in the one space, people find it much easier to physically kind of see the space and where everything interacts rather than being told it or showed it on a spreadsheet. So yeah, we operate within, we've actually had a few conversations with Tim as well about, spitballing different applications of using GIS and remote sensing. But yeah, pretty much every industry we work in.
And Adrian, with that industry reach, what's the collaboration you find with the university? You're an engineer by heart, so it'd be hard for you to exclude any industry engagement as well. What sort of highlights would you have between industry and academia that comes to mind?
Look, there's a whole range, of course, beyond just engineering, Chris. And look, I'm fortunate I was a scientist, oceanographer, etc. before I was an engineer. So the marine environment, of course, is key. The environment, animal ecology, ecosystems. You mentioned forest industries earlier. We've just received some money to do a wealth of research into sustainability again of forest industries, because coming back to the built environment, the use of timber for medium density housing and lower level infrastructure, medium high rise, is growing, because timber, of course, is hopefully a sustainable resource which captures carbon, which we can keep growing forests and we can recycle it and move on. So how to sustainably maintain a timber industry of sorts is also key to the university. And then, of course, all of the engineering sort of facets, which ties in with what Tim's talking about, how we can do what we do better, faster, more efficiently, to assist clients across industry. So we have a very open door. Please pass my phone number around. I'm very keen for industry to reach out to the University of the Sunshine Coast, because we're very enthusiastic about partnering with industry to progress any number of these research initiatives. Nice.
And what we might do is, Michael, you and I, let's have a discussion in terms of the smart cities. We were talking sort of pre-session on the smart building versus the smart precinct versus the smart city. And I think we'll hopefully trigger some thoughts with Tim in terms of the smart factory and the smart manufacturing approach, because really it is about data collection and appropriate analysis of that data and understanding what that data is presenting. You mentioned there's about 100 smart city programs that you've kind of looked at. Any highlights that you're doing? And people counting is particularly one of them that you're doing?
Look, I think, again, building on what Adrian's saying in terms of ecosystems, we need to build ecosystems. This time it's for smart technologies and understanding the physical, and then the way we collect, and then how we take the data and how we form it so it's useful for people. Because at the end of the day, most staff in council just want the data to be able to inform what they need, and we help build that process to gather what they need in order for that to work or remotely monitor. So I think really good, really important highlights for us in terms of being able to do people movement and counting. And, some people on the Sunshine Coast are concerned that council's watching them. We're not. We're actually using cameras that use edge processing. So no vision leaves the camera or the trailer or the device. We actually just get data packets that tell us about the number of people or vehicles that have moved through an intersection. And why is that important? It's telling us in a location where a population is growing rapidly, what we need to do for our roads, for our intersections, for all of our paths, and help to build our budgets. But also, because we're taking that analysis, we're able to stretch our budgets further because we're actually understanding how the use is occurring. And so we can actually choose not to replace and renew certain aspects of our infrastructure because it hasn't been affected to the extent that we were thinking it would. So being able to introduce dynamic budgeting is helping our bike track at Caloundra to be able to actually understand the combination of rainfall eroding the bike tracks combined with the number of users helps us equal the amount of money they need for maintenance each year. And they're also using the same data for expanding the facility for capital works. And in an environment where we're increasingly tighter budgets and more people expecting to use our regional assets, understanding the heartbeat of the region is increasingly important.
Anything else on sort of the security side in terms of, Tim, within your forum, and even I'll open it up to even Adrian as well, in terms of security, critical infrastructure protection, and also cyber security. Do you find that that's covered within your forum, or is much of a subject of interest?
It's definitely a subject of interest, but a lot of the time we divide our for simplicity and clarity, we divide our cohort up into manufacturers and then non-manufacturers, and within the non-manufacturers there's support industries, of which IT and cyber and those kinds of organizations come within that particular cohort. There are a number of organizations that fit that particular bill that will support our cohort. A lot of the time it's really just information sharing, it's not selling, but we'll often make referrals for manufacturers that specifically say, hey, I need someone who's going to give me a no BS kind of answer or level of support that's in and around this space. Can you please connect me up? So that's the kind of thing that we've got going on at the moment.
Great. And Adrian, from a university perspective on security critical infrastructure?
Look, it's certainly an area of interest, particularly to our IT folk, and especially they work with CISAC that we've already mentioned. So, and as more and more facets of our lives become digitised, and the information volume increases, then of course the complexity and the security of that information is key as well. So yes, it remains certainly an area of high interest for us at the university.
And Riley, I was going to ask, what do you do on a day-to-day basis across sort of geospatial intelligence within the region, if you can, but yeah, just day to day, because I imagine critical infrastructure protection or sort of coastal monitoring and land management is a big facet of what you do.
Yeah, so we work within both of those factors. We also run scenarios as well, so we can assist organisations with understanding how their critical infrastructure will be impacted by things like climate change. So with the increase of cyclones or wildfires or these mass events, we can not only set satellites to be able to view what's happening on the ground at that particular time, so we can get emergency services to where they need to go, but also assess the damage across, so we can provide that information back to council, back to insurance agencies and things like that. In terms of the actual security, we're seeing a lot more requests come from our clients that aren't even within the defence space, wanting to know, where the data is coming from, where it's currently being stored, because we are requesting as well really high resolution imagery on certain areas. We have to be really critical with what clients we respond to, what areas we supply imagery in. We get a number of kind of dodgy requests per week from certain parts of the globe wanting to see other certain parts of the globe, thinking that we're not going to be able to screen those. So yeah, surveying a lot of that within the security sector as well is pretty important for us. But just for my day-to-day, it's kind of blocked up between having conversations with clients who usually don't particularly have like a spatial background, and disseminating what their requirements are in our brains, and coming up with workflows for them, as well as, like I said, I've been working pretty heavily trying to educate the schools just on the option that geospatial is a very fun career path.
Absolutely. The more we cover on the space sector, the more excitement I have, and also cybersecurity and space and that survey data, the amount of data that is generated, cybersecurity becomes a critical aspect of that. Huge. As well as protecting the information from compromise itself. Look, with time, we're right on time. Wendy, I'm going to come to you now. If you want to share your screen, let's have a look at sort of the options that we've got for Sunshine Coast, and then that'll allow at least 5 to 10 minutes of discussion at the end as a takeaway, and then we'll run through the July 3 event that we've got coming up. And Tim, we do follow that model of having beer and wine at a sundowner event for July 3 because it works. That's why. Wendy, welcome to share your screen, full screen if you can. That'd be wonderful. Okay, over to you, Wendy.
Here we go. So why the Sunshine Coast? Can you hear me? All right.
Yes, all good.
Okay, so I guess one of the things that I said is that we ran marketing campaigns, and for years the Sunshine Coast has really been known as a tourism destination. And what we've been doing is to really change that, I suppose, perception so that people understand that there is business benefits here. So we put together this video, and I think it summarises a lot of the opportunities here. So I'll just play that if that's okay.
Go for it.
Right, so I guess what's quite important behind that video is that we have a regional economic development strategy which is actually guiding our growth. So we have a plan, and that strategy has been developed in consultation with the community. So it's not just a council plan, and we've got everybody on board to help achieve that. So just really a high-level overview of the Sunshine Coast. There's 537 LGAs in Australia. We're the 9th fastest growing. GRP of 20 billion, population around that 350 million. I guess what's important is that we have a workforce catchment of 1 million people, 35,000 businesses, but a lot of those are small businesses, looking to grow to about 600,000. But what's really special about the Sunshine Coast is that we're really highly connected and a highly collaborative business community. And I think Tim gave a great example of that with the manufacturing forum. So you asked me, Chris, what's special about the Sunshine Coast? And so really it's a combination of things. The top map here is what we call a major projects map. And that is, I've been with council for 10 years. When I first started, I think there were 8 major projects. Now there's 18 major projects. And some of the main ones are the Sunshine Coast Airport. I was told this week that the Sunshine Coast Airport is the fastest growing airport in Australia. We've got our new CBD. We have the university. We have our international broadband cable. We are a delivery partner in the 2032 Olympics. We have an enviable lifestyle, a great innovation ecosystem. But I guess where I think we have a point of difference is first around our international cable network. And also, I think the fact that council is very proactive and supportive and open to new ideas. So just drilling down into this, we call this Michael's digital plumbing. But we have the international broadband cable, which has come in. We have the cable landing station. We have the data centre. There's been a lot of discussion here about the data centre, and in fact, our data centre on the Sunshine Coast is actually expanding. Within our CBD, we have a unique bundle of digital infrastructure, including our Wi-Fi 6 network, 5G broadband, some of the things that Michael's spoken about in terms of multifunction poles and digital kiosks. And I guess the other point where we want to have a difference is providing outstanding investment support service. So we say we aim to provide the most outstanding support, and that's a big claim. And so here on the left, we have a whole lot of all the services that our investment team provides. On the right, it's some of the services that our colleagues in economic development provide. But I just really wanted to drill down on a couple of these things. So one is our new testing tech service, and the other one is running these ideation sessions. Now, I've got a video here.
Hi, I'm Laura, an avatar created by Sunshine Coast Council. I am here to show you how serious Council is about using and supporting tech development in the region. Let me introduce you to Testing Tech in Paradise, an exciting opportunity for your business to test your tech or devices in a real-world environment. In this video, we feature a case study called The Connected Worker, in which Sunshine Coast Council, in partnership with the AVR Lab, is testing augmented reality wearables and software using the Maroochydore City Centre's digital assets. I'll hand you over to Michael from Council to explain how we've been testing tech in Paradise.
The Connected Worker trial demonstrates how the Sunshine Coast is uniquely positioned to provide the opportunity for companies to come and test and evaluate technologies prior to their commercialisation.
The AVR Lab is an augmented and virtual reality organisation, and we help organisations leverage augmented and virtual reality in order to digitise their workflows for people who are out on the field. The Connected Worker trial enabled us to take the hardware of the wearables and the software and test them together on a Wi-Fi 6 network. This is something that we've not been able to do up until now.
We'll be out in the field today. We'll be looking at a pit, a pole and a digital kiosk. We will also be testing a data rack to demonstrate the remote hands functionality.
Inspection below ground. Safe.
Take video. Media conversion device, corroded. Everything else in good condition.
Wearables are what enables organisations and people to be connected with each other in remote circumstances. The person who's actually out in the field is able to share what they see.
You're able to count down 4 of those modules?
3, 4.
So if you look in there, can you see port 106?
Yep, I can see your arrow.
The person in the control room is able to annotate and share information in real time to help that person solve the problem that's faced with them at that time.
The speed of change and the introduction of new technologies is just exploding. Because we've got an extensive digital plumbing network for Council to expand its offering from just using its infrastructure for its own purpose so that it can be used by research facilities, by companies and institutions. And the ability is quite unique in Australia because we're not aware of other locations that are currently offering this particular service or opportunity.
We found that there was high performance and low latency, which is absolutely fantastic. So we know that a Wi-Fi 6 network means that people were able to do their things and engage in a real-time capability.
Thanks so much for watching the Connected Worker case study. I'm Wendy McDonald and I'm the person at the Sunshine Coast Council to talk to if you're interested in the Sunshine Coast as the location for your next tech trial. I'd love to hear from you. Please call me or email me anytime.
So last year, we started running ideation sessions, and the first one was in sports tech. So we put it out there to the community, come help us design the future high-tech sports world of the Sunshine Coast. And we had 50 people in a room, and we came up with 38 ideas. They were shaped into some technology themes. And now we've actually got some projects going. Because one of the ladies who was involved in one of the groups was very passionate about accessible parking, we found that Council had already mapped where all the accessible car parks are, but nobody actually knew if they were available. So now we've got a small trial using sensors and apps to actually identify when those car parks are available. As a result of that, it led to us running another ideation session, which is around geospatial intelligence. And I guess this is really, this has been the catalyst now for a whole lot of things which are rolling out. What's really exciting is a core group of people have come together That core group wants to create a centre of excellence, and I guess and the goal there will be to promote geospatial capability nationally and internationally, and we'll ideally be able to get some accelerated funding for that. So I guess we now have other ideation sessions planned, but I can talk about that another time. So I guess just how we help, say, tech companies, we help people find sites. We've created a new service called Data Connect. So if you come to the Sunshine Coast and you have high data needs, we can basically spec out what your data needs are. We have a database of about 10 leading telcos now. Some of those are smaller and larger. And I guess one of the benefits of the cable is it has actually created the attraction of more telcos to the Sunshine Coast, and that has created a far more competitive pricing model. Other ways that we help people is we've created this tool called our Investment and Growth Toolkit. And I guess it's a bit hard to see, but it's basically every single thing that we could think of. If you were coming to Australia, what would you need to know in terms of setting up a business? If you wanted information about visas, right through if you're coming to Queensland, what do you need to know about Queensland? You've come to the Sunshine Coast. So, for example, I might go out and have a meeting with a client, and last week, I think during those discussions, I sent off 11 emails, just clicking through this toolkit and connecting them with this particular person he wanted information about a jobs hub, industry groups. He wanted to run some reports for his business in terms of economic data. So a lot of information there to help businesses. Yeah, so I guess that's the end of a very short presentation, but in summary, the Sunshine Coast, I think, is totally positioned to support new technology businesses and help them grow. One of the unique offerings we've got is the ability to come and test and trial new technology, and that's a new service. And I guess what that involves is companies who may want to test and trial in a real world environment prior to commercialisation. They can meet with us, we can understand what their goals are, and then we have a system of where we can evaluate whether we can help them, and we actually now have some trials underway.
Wonderful, Wendy. I didn't know it was that good. We should have started with that, and then that would have been a good introduction, although it's still a good way to close. One thing I did when I was speaking to the CISAC, the Critical Infrastructure ISAC, was they felt that the pipe coming into the Sunshine Coast was really good resiliency and redundancy for the main pipes into Perth and Sydney, because if those get compromised, we'll go dark. So I think just from that critical infrastructure aspect, it's quite important. And again, as you say, a biosphere, can you just describe that a little bit more? Does that create any sort of investment opportunities as well, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so absolutely, Chris. So a biosphere really provides, I suppose, a balanced way of us to be able to continue economic development, but to also nurture and to support our environment. And so increasingly, companies have pressures on them and will have demands in the future for net zero targets. And I guess as the Sunshine Coast strategy evolves around that, we will be more able to support businesses in that area.
Wonderful. Look, we've got some articles. We've got a new article coming out in the Australian Space magazine as well in this context, but we'll have a link in the show notes. Just open it up to the panel, particularly any key takeaways there. I think the number of sort of projects and leads there that's been sort of discussed and mapped out. I think it's really critical to have that map there. But just open up to the panel in terms of their touch points within that, and then as you do that, I'll come back to the panel screen. But yeah, just open up to the panel. Maybe to Adrian in terms of the cross sector aspect of that in some of those key projects.
Yeah, look, Chris, without delving into any particular projects, I think events like this highlight the wealth of innovation that is occurring across the coast, from a government and industry perspective. And as a representative of the university, my desire is to make sure that we're abreast of that and that we continue these conversations both via these fora and offline to make sure that we're not doing things in our own little silos, and that we are collaborating together to make sure the coast is utilising this information and growing as sustainably and appropriately as we can. So that's my takeaway from this event.
Nice. And silos is a critical one, Michael, for local government to avoid wherever possible.
Absolutely. Yep. I think one of the things that I really enjoy about working in this council here is that we are able to actually report our learnings. You know, when things go wrong during our trials and evaluations, we actually share what they are and we build on them. And having the testing tech in Paradise is actually, because we've got the legacy assets that we've now built, we can make an offering to the region and beyond that wasn't previously available, and was also not readily available in many other parts of the world. There are some places that talk about test beds and the like, and I guess that's where we're positioning ourselves, because we've actually got the attitude, got the culture, got the ability to do it, and have already got that capability across the region. And
Michael, I think, again, the map tells a picture says 1,000 words. Is that something comparative? Do you find that allows that integration to occur, that innovation and integration between manufacturers? Because they can be quite, not silo driven, but they are very focused in what they actually do, their own skill sets and their own deliveries. But looking outside the box from a business perspective and their sort of ecosystem and their partner network creates new opportunities, new business opportunities in particular. I think silos are the last century. This century is about integrating and working together, and those that are leaders in a space are actually looking for ways to connect. We find that really good vendor partners to council are ones who say, we're not doing what you're asking us to do right now, but we can actually work that and develop that capability up, or we can bring somebody else to the table to do that. And it's those companies that we're finding are really impressive and making what we're doing a lot easier. But we need to actually know what we're looking for, because at the end of the day, people need to know what you want and how you want that to work. And a really key part of that process we use with our problem statement management is understanding what we're trying to achieve, how we might do it, how we might evaluate it, and what does success look like. Because if we don't know those four things, we're really not sure where we're going. But bringing those people together is a key outcome. Absolutely. Right. And Tim, just the feedback that you get from that approach from a council, like I said, I've been around for a little while. I haven't heard haven't seen this much nationally. Do you find that that's the feedback you get from your forum members as to it makes business easier?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we're fortunate to have a good foundation is a culture which is more open and more collaborative and more willing to share. So trying to connect, one of the things we're really big on is trying to connect manufacturers up with peers who are, in a non-competitive kind of a space, but, are also manufacturers, and, they've been there and they've done it, and they've learnt some lessons the hard way. And for the most part, they're very willing and open to share those things. And that's, again, I think that's the foundation that a region really needs if it's going to be able to grow those sectors and have collective lessons learned, instead of everyone just having to do everything the hard way all the time.
Nice. And Riley, you're the epitome, I suppose, of the workforce, both from being there, growing up there, being educated there, and then returning there. And it sounds like you're really giving back and sort of leaning forward in terms of back into the schools. What would be a good takeaway message, particularly when you see a video like that, and sort of, you must be a proud local girl, but it gives you a lot of confidence into the future and workforce development?
Yeah, it definitely does. And even just some of the ideation sessions that we had last year, I met a number of people that I'd never met before, and I felt like I had met everyone in our industry, but people who had also been working from home, but working for companies that are, in Europe and in Asia. And yeah, it was just really great to kind of all get in the same room with the same common problems of just like, hey, I'd like to also be social with people who have a similar mindset to me. It's really great. As well as commenting on the getting together, it's a non-competitive forum. Like, we've had a few sessions trying to develop this centre of excellence and trying to figure out what that kind of means, and some tangible, things that we can kind of put forward, not just having a name to something, but actually having a mission behind it. And, we've brought people into the room that would from the outset seem like our competitors in some space or offer a similar service to us. But definitely what we've found is everyone kind of has their niche. Everyone has particularly that singular thing that they really enjoy working on. And we've been able to swap business cards and share things around, or saying, you know, I had a meeting with this client the other day. We weren't able to offer that service because we don't currently have someone on our books that does this, but you might be able to. So yeah, just I feel like the notion of competitiveness within the commercial sector is completely going to change. And it's really nice to sit in a very friendly, welcoming environment, as the coastal people tend to be. We're much more laid back. I feel like it's less bite and scratchy than some of the cities and things like that. So to be able to bring that into the work environment is just, incredible.
Nice work. Look, and thank you so much for the panel. I'm just conscious of time. We'll close off, but we likewise, even just as we put this session together and we're preparing for the July 3 event, also uncovering people who are working on the Sunshine Coast in completely different sectors, and unbeknownst to us, they suddenly pop up in the Sunshine Coast, even though they represent a space company or some other sort of area as well. But look, thank you to our panel, Dr. Adrian McCallum, Riley McGlusky, Tim Kelly, Michael Werat and Wendy McDonald. We'll acknowledge our national and annual series sponsors that allow us to keep working, but this series is being sponsored by the Sunshine Coast City Council, as well as our national sponsors, Curtin University Security Exhibition and Conference and DAVCOR. Just as a takeaway here, we will see you in Maroochydore at the Altitude 9 on July 3rd. Fleet Space is one of those that we discovered at the ideation session there last year. Jared Oliver, their chief scientist for Fleet Space based in South Australia, is working on the Sunshine Coast. Likewise, we're putting an event on July 4, and we've discovered that Peter Williams, General Manager of Sales for Southern Launch, they're about to start trialling launches out of South Australia. He's also based on the Sunshine Coast. Tim Kelly, we've obviously heard from today, and we'll hear more from Tim and from some of the cohort as well that we've got, and Simon Webster. We interviewed Simon at the ideation session. He's the Executive Manager of Advanced Capability and what Queensland Fire and Emergency Services is working on in this area as well. We'll have a number of pitch sessions from local businesses trialling tech. We've heard about this big 3D printer. We're trying to not bring the printer to the area, but we'll hear more about that, as well as some cybersecurity startups and the like. So we'll see you on July 3rd. And if you want an excuse to get, particularly for the interstaters, and to come to Queensland, visit on July 3rd. We're putting a session together on July 4 with Griffith University, looking at national launch opportunities and capabilities in Australia. And I mentioned Southern Launch there, so Peter will join us for that particular session as well. But we've got Equatorial Launch Australia, Rocket Lab as well, and iLaunch Trailblazer as well. So that's an excuse to get a flight, international or interstate, and come to the Sunshine Coast. Wendy, we've got some details. There'll be some site visits on July 3 as well. We'll have a transfer from Brisbane down to the Sunshine Coast and back as well. So there's really no excuse to come on July 3rd. And you can have a look at the data centre as well as some smart city opportunities as well. So from our audience in particular in security space, smart cities and critical infrastructure, there's a number in the audience that I'm aware have signed in on this one, and we'll try to get the CI ISAC from our lead from Singapore in on July 3rd as well. But it is set to be a great session, and it's great to have the in-person opportunity. This was a wonderful opening to the series. We'll be back also in August for a sort of close off, and hopefully we've got some takeaways. But thank you very much for attending. Conscious of time with a few minutes to go. We've got no questions from the audience. This is your last opportunity if you want to fire in a question. I bet one person asks one and then opens up a floodgate of questions. We'll run out of time. But otherwise, thanks. And any comments as well. Wendy's details are on our Marketplace Hub. We'll have it in the link in the show notes when we release the video for this. But Wendy's, the main call to action here is to contact Wendy, make some inquiries as to what you can do. And then even through each of these, Adrian, if you're interested in the university and what they're doing and partnering, Tim Kelly with the Manufacturing Excellence Forum, obviously 2,000 members. Was that about right, Tim? Sorry?
300, but
300, but
Yeah, there's 1,400 manufacturers here locally.
There you go.
But look, I'm exaggerate as far as you like. It's totally okay.
Beautiful. He's aiming for 2,000 members. There you go. And Riley there with Geospatial Intelligence. That's a national company as well, but with a lot of focus there on Sunshine Coast. Wendy, Michael, thank you very much on behalf of the Sunshine Coast City Council, and Danielle in the background who makes everything happen as well. On that note, we'll close off and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.